Hello, you're live on the Archie Luxury and the Paul Pluta channels. Today, I've got a very special guest, and this is Mr. Tim Bender. Tim Bender. He's very kindly agreed to come on my channel. And what we are talking about today, I came across because I'm trying to do a book on amazing watch stories. Everybody, I think, watches are an incredibly personal thing. Men can't really have terribly much jewelry, unless you're Greek, of course. Then you can have. That's a joke. That's a joke. No offense to anyone Greek there. You can have, watches are something that all men of all classes, all professions, all whatever can share and enjoy. And today, our good friend Tim has an amazing story. This is an amazing story, and this involves a very special Omega. This is actually a story about a very special Omega, which is it's an Omega which belonged to a decorated American. This here, Tim, this is the story of Lieutenant Colonel George Finter. Tell me more.
Yeah, that's correct, and thank you for having me on, Paul. So my name's Tim Bender. I run Fog City Vintage, and I came across this watch back in May of this year. Totally, it's an incredible piece as a collection. Initially, a collector, a friend of mine, had posted this on Instagram. I saw it was a really cool Omega. It was pictured with a stack of military documents, and it jumped out at me near immediately. Shot him a DM, asked him if it was for sale, and was politely told that it would probably never be. 6 weeks later goes by, and I get contacted. He had an opportunity to move on a piece that was also special, so we agreed on a price. I wired the funds, and this watch showed up. When I got the piece, I was completely blown away with what was included as part of the collection. So first and foremost, the watch is in outstanding condition, and the reason for that I'll kind of jump into a bit later. But upon opening this package, it had hand-signed letters of condolence from President Richard Nixon, General Westmoreland, Creighton Abrams, senators, the report of his casualty when this gentleman's plane went down in Vietnam while doing a reconnaissance mission, passports, every bit of paperwork associated with his military career for the most part was included. And how that all came to be is, so this gentleman was killed in action in Vietnam in February of 1970. Upon his death, all of his personal effects were sent back to his family in Maryland and really forgotten about for the better part of 50 years. So he had two daughters. Both had passed pretty early on, never married, never had children. The entire estate was left to a neighbor of his youngest daughter, Michaela, and the entire estate was put up for auction as she, acquired substantial medical bills towards the end of her life. A collector had the foresight. He was interested in the watch. Saw that there was another lot that was part of this local estate sale, and the other lot had some military documents. He was hoping to find pictures of the gentleman wearing the watch. Ended up, getting the package, and then went on to sell it to the collector that I ultimately purchased it from. But it's truly a national treasure, and I think to your point, Paul, I mean, it's so much more than a watch. This watch was likely purchased while this gentleman was on R&R. The extracts from Omega detail a delivery date to Hong Kong in May of 1969. So this watch would have been no more than 6 or 7 months old at the time of his death, and we know that he had two watches, and this one definitely returned back with him to Vietnam. The first was an Angelus chronograph with a broken band, so this watch was likely purchased as a replacement and could very well have been on his wrist when his plane went down.
Yes.
So, upon getting this package, again, completely blown away with everything that was included. And I just became absolutely fascinated with the story, trying to put together the pieces of how this collection even came to be. Why no other family members had this in their possession. It was just such an important piece of Americana. And through my research, I tracked down the attorney that handled the estate. By the time she got involved, again, the daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Finter had gotten really sick. By the time the attorney got involved, she was really acting on her behalf. She had no idea why I was calling all these years later. I was trying to get as much details about this as possible. Was able to uncover, where some other important lots went, including his burial flag and medals. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to reacquire those for the collection. But most importantly, I wanted to find if there was anyone that would have interest in receiving copies of these documents back, given their importance. And through that, I found that he had one last surviving nephew, and he was completely blown away when I reached out to him. He was a young boy when his uncle died. He knew his uncle was doing something special in the military, and was completely floored when he learned and ultimately had a lot of his unanswered questions answered. So, then taking a step back and looking at this gentleman's military career, clearly he was someone of importance. President Nixon was not hand inking signatures on condolence letters for anyone. A part of the collection as well includes a concealed carry permit, his passport, and a chauffeur's license. He was in and out of Chile when we weren't really supposed to be involved there. Just very interesting, personal items that were included with his personal property as well, including audio recording equipment, camera equipment. So clearly he was doing some interesting things and had a very decorated military career. So it's an amazing watch and an amazing collection, and really happy to come on and ultimately share this story because. It might be one of the most complete and detailed provenance pieces to ever come to market. This watch will be going to auction at Christie's in December as part of their important watches, and it's featured as an American Icons, which is a smaller subset of some of the watches that they'll be auctioning off. And it's side by side property that was owned by President George Bush and Ernest Hemingway. So. It's a great honor, and happy to take the show wherever you feels best, Paul.
Sure, it's an incredible story because the Omega 300 Seamaster is actually a very beautiful watch. I think I've actually owned a few Omega 300s, and you're a vintage dealer yourself. There, you would have to agree with me. It's a very nice model.
Oh, it's beautiful. In my personal opinion, I much prefer it over a Speedmaster of the era. The sword hands, the kind of bakelite bezel that it has. It's a remarkable watch. It wears well. It's very tool-like in function, and it's taken on a beautiful patina.
The terrible story, of course, to this watch, the reason why it's in such good condition. For starters, this particular gentleman, he was a lieutenant colonel, which is pretty senior rank. That's above a major. He would have been on good money, and he was unfortunately he was only 39 years old. I've seen photos of him. I've tried to do some research from what you've sent me, and he was a 39-year-old lieutenant colonel, a career officer. He joined the military before he was 20, and the sad thing is, you look at his photos. He seems like he looks like an average guy. He doesn't look like a pompous. When you say lieutenant colonel, you think, geez, this would be some very old guy. But he obviously worked very, very hard to get that rank. He looks like the sad thing is, basically his death destroyed his whole family. His daughter's never married. His wife, okay, she got a letter from President Nixon, but I'm sure she would have preferred her husband to come back.
100%. Yeah, I mean, and you know, it's really sad because you know, I was able to also track down people that served with him. You know, he was on his last tour, I think within months away from going home and returning back to the U.S. Permanently. And again, just wanted to go up and fly one last mission. I guess he was trying to also earn some sort of medal for you know, a certain amount of airtime, and decided to go up that day. The story was, you know, they were flying past their base, just doing some aerial reconnaissance of the surrounding areas, and it's unknown if I guess they flew into a valley, and you know, there's a certain way you're supposed to approach, and they didn't give themselves enough space to ultimately, you know, pull out should there be anything, any sort of catastrophic failure. But it's unknown if the plane was shot down by ground fire, that there was some sort of mechanical error. But the plane ultimately went down, and yeah, I mean, it's a very sad story. And you know, that's also kind of why this watch is in such remarkable condition, is it did return back with his family. And from what I understand and talking to everyone that knew the family, you know, this definitely was a traumatizing life event for them. And it sounds like they really just kind of forgot all about him, packed his stuff away, and there wasn't really mention of him in the family after that.
Yeah, it's a very, very tragic story, and it just shows you how nasty war can be. It's a very, very sad story. I mean, he was 39. I mean, I was born in 72, so this guy died before I was born. He was 39, yeah. young. That's so young. And to be a lieutenant colonel, my God, that's he had such promise. I mean, this guy really would have been, you know, he would have done well in commerce. Had he gone into commerce after this, you know, it's such a leadership role. It's such a tragedy. And
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, with the watch itself there, you've got a, did you get the box and papers for it, or is it just the watch, or what's the story there?
Yeah, so when I received it, it was just the watch head only.
Okay.
I don't know what happened with the box and papers.
No,
the watch
of course,
was detailed on his property report as being you know, one of the articles that was sent back to his family.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, who knows what's happened? But you know, based on condition, you know, the story seems to align that this watch just sat away for the last 50 years, and you know, again, it couldn't have been worn more than a handful of months prior to you know, ultimately going back to the States.
Have you worn the watch yourself?
Of course. I mean, that's one of the perks of being a dealer and doing what I do, is you definitely get to enjoy these watches, and it was a remarkable piece. You know, it's aged beautifully. The watch alone, I mean, you know, finding a comparable example is going to be very hard. So I mean, it's absolutely in pristine condition. I loved the piece while it was in my custody. But yeah, I mean, it's a remarkable piece of history, a remarkable watch. The watch alone is something special, and then you kind of put together the whole package. That's included
NATO,
with the collection.
it was on a NATO when you got it?
It was not. No, I've added that NATO back.
Okay, what was it on when you got it? It was just the head alone?
Head alone, that's correct.
I see. Okay.
So it had been owned by a collector previously, and you know, I'm not 100% certain how that watch was received. There actually are some very interesting links from when this collection was first purchased. The gentleman went on Rolex forum and Omega forum just to you know, share his recent purchase and try to get, you know, feedback from the community. So those links can be found if you were to search for this watch when it was purchased after that estate sale.
So as far as this watch goes, it's kind of sad that it's kind of sad it didn't go to someone in his family. it's kind of sad that it's sort of what's kind of sad is that nobody, you know, it's not really.
It sounds like he had no family. Again,
Yeah.
I mean, there was no one to even leave the estate of his last surviving daughter, and it went to a neighbor that had been helping her towards the end of her life. And again, she I guess acquired a lot of medical bills by the time the attorney was involved. They just went to sell the estate.
Did you research where they were from? Were they wealthy, or what were they?
No. I mean, middle class folks lived in
Yes.
Havre de Grace, Maryland, which is a rural community outside
Okay.
of Baltimore.
Okay.
And he was stationed out of Aberdeen Proving Grounds, I think was the name of the base, which is in that
Yes.
area. And again, I mean, long military career, did a lot of interesting things, and that's ultimately where his family had settled down. And, it's very interesting too. Over the course of this research, I reached out to the Historical Society to see if they had any sort of information on this individual. The woman that ended up helping me turned out to be a neighbor of his, and she just got goosebumps as well.
What was he like as a guy? Was he a nice gentleman? How was he? What did you hear?
From everyone that I spoke with, I mean, he was a very respected individual. The family lived a very quiet life. Given what we know about his military career, he was doing some interesting things. So it would really align with him wanting some additional privacy about what he was doing during the Cold War and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, he seemed to have been a great guy, a family man, loved his daughters, and the family just kind of lived in a rural community and wanted their privacy and kept to themselves.
Yes. Tell me this. Why don't you just keep this watch yourself? Why are you selling it? That's what I don't understand. Yeah,
I mean, when I received this piece, I mean, it was clearly very important. I've not seen a collection like this, and ultimately the reason I chose to partner with Christie's in selling this is, they have the reach to get this into the collection of a museum. I am a watch dealer myself. I can't afford to keep every piece nor donate it, but
Sure.
I want to make sure that this gentleman's legacy is really preserved and gets into the right hands, and hopefully it does wind up in a museum, because you have to see these documents and this watch together to understand its importance. And it's crazy to think that this gentleman's legacy was on the cusp of being completely forgotten about if it wasn't for an Instagram post, and then the hours that I put into trying to research the background behind this individual. It's just, it's definitely sad, but it's a remarkable piece of Americana.
Yes. Yes. Have you had much interest in it? What sort of interest has it had there?
We've been getting a tremendous amount of interest. Again, this is one of the most detailed, provenance type pieces to ever come to market. The watch alone is in fantastic condition, but the collection as a whole is really something special. It goes far beyond just a watch, far beyond. It's a time capsule. This represents everything about this individual's life, and is a remarkable piece of Americana.
So tell me, did you get the watch serviced, or what sort of restoration work have you done on it?
So it looks like there was no restoration work that was done. When I had acquired the watch, there was a receipt from LA Watchworks, and it was good that when this individual who initially purchased the watch in 2013 had asked the community, what should be done, they recommended that it go to somebody who really specializes in vintage pieces, and no restoration was done. It was purely a movement service. And it looked like the crown was replaced just to make sure that it was, appropriate for everyday wear. The original crown is included. But yeah, no, it remains in phenomenal shape, untouched, never polished. And the patina that the watch has taken on is absolutely gorgeous. But yeah, I mean, luckily it had not been, restored by somebody who wasn't, aware of how to properly care for something like that.
What's the Christie's estimate on this watch here?
It's 12 to 18,000 is what they've opened up the that's the initial estimate that I think we're going to market with.
Okay, that's not much, really.
No, I mean it's when looking at this and kind of our thoughts when putting this watch out to market is you have to really.
I must say, to be honest with you, I really one thing that worries me as a collector is when you do depart this earth, what do you do with amazing pieces? And I got to be honest with you. I tend to think that you're probably better off to auction it like you have there. If you gave it to a museum, the problem is you give anything away. Like I give my son something, he doesn't really appreciate it because he hasn't worked for it. He hasn't bought it. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes you have to sell something to make people appreciate it. Nobody appreciates things that are free. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And if you gave it to a museum, I don't think they would appreciate it. This is I'm just being very, very fickle here.
Yep.
I think, look, Christie's has got amazing exposure. They wouldn't handle the piece unless it was amazing. Christie's themselves get hundreds of, mediocre bits, and unless it was an amazing piece, they really wouldn't be that interested. I think what you're doing is probably the best way to get it into a amazing collection, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is there's been a lot of PR that's gone into bringing this watch to where it is. Again, it's a wonderful watch. It's amazing that this collection is so intact. But this gentleman's legacy was going to be completely forgotten about if it wasn't for this Instagram post and me really becoming fascinated and trying to put all of the pieces of this puzzle together. And really we're trying to tell this gentleman's story and how important pieces like this are, and that really was the idea behind.
He was wearing the watch when he died, or no? It was.
We have no way of knowing with certainty.
Okay.
My assessment in looking over the personal property report, which is included in this collection, is he had an Angelus chronograph with a broken band. Just knowing what I know of gentlemen of this era, specifically, military folks, they didn't have tremendous collections. They had their one watch. We do know that this watch was delivered to Hong Kong in May of 1969. It was likely purchased as a replacement for his Angelus chronograph. And what was interesting is, so I think I'd sent you links to some of the text messages that I had with his nephew when I first had tried to find out who this gentleman was. It's a remarkable story. I definitely encourage any of your viewers to go on my Instagram, which is @fogcityvintage.com. Through the text exchange that we had, and ultimately the phone calls, he knew that there was a watch that that George had purchased for his grandfather as well. Turned out to be the exact same Angelus. But yeah, we do know, as part of the personal property report, that he had an Angelus chronograph and then this watch. If the Angelus chronograph had a broken band, that's likely why this watch would have been purchased as a replacement to that.
You never saw the Angelus chronograph, did you?
So I think the gentleman who initially had purchased this did buy it. He sold it separately. But what was remarkable is when I did speak with his nephew and return copies of these documents back to him, he knew that this watch existed, that George had purchased it for his grandfather, and then spent the better part of a weekend trying to find where it had gone. He sent me pictures, and it was the exact same watch that was purchased, and it was purchased in Europe while George was doing whatever he was doing at the time.
So the Angelus is where is that residing now? Who's got that?
So the Angelus that belonged to George. I do not know where that had gone. It was likely sold. The Angelus that George had purchased for his father, which was a matching watch, still resides with the nephew. Got you.
I see. So tell me this, with this story in that there, what do you hope will happen to the watch? What's your result besides it selling for a substantial sum? What's your hope with this auction?
I mean, my hope for this auction, it's been a remarkable honor to really be able to tell this gentleman's story. Again, he had a last surviving nephew that had no idea who this gentleman was. Through my research, I was able to track him down and return these documents back to his family. He was brought to tears when I initially had reached out. Had no idea that these articles existed. And I think to your point, watches are such an important item for a man, and I think this really starts to highlight the importance of them, and really it's going to bring a lot of other people into the fold as we're talking about a piece like this, and I think it's going to perform very well. We've gotten a lot of great interest thus far. We've gotten press coverage on Hodinkee, but ultimately being able to tell this man's story and make sure that his legacy is not forgotten has been a top priority for me, and I think it's going to bring a lot of interest into watches, specifically pieces like this, in years to come.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely an amazing story, and I think it's certainly well worth. It's a very difficult thing, I mean, look, if you were super rich, you would like to give it to a museum, but I dare say they probably wouldn't respect it. Yeah, I mean, unless it was expensive. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And this is, I mean, this is a watch that I think is going to test that market, and it will perform really well because of the story. I mean, it's so much more than a watch. It's truly an American treasure, and being able to get this piece, some attention. I also feel that if this does go to a private collection, it's likely going to return back to market at some point in time. And if you look at watches historically that go to auction, now we've had a chance to market this piece. People are going to be familiar with it, and if it comes back to market again, people will have a baseline for value. There will just be more press and attention that's brought behind a piece like this, and I expect it will sell for substantially more if it ever comes to auction again.
Yeah. No, look, I think it's an amazing piece, a very tragic story because he was in his prime. I mean, a lieutenant colonel. I mean, 1970 lieutenant colonel. The next 20 years would have been his oyster. The world would have been his oyster, really. He
absolutely.
He would have. I can't see him just. He would have achieved so much, and I kind of. It's very sad that his daughters didn't marry. Just a very, very tragic. Just shows you how nasty war can be, and.
Absolutely.
It's a very much a tragedy there. Look, I want to say thanks for sharing that story with us, and I wish you well. I mean, I was a little bit. I got to be honest with you. When I first heard the story, I was a little bit. I thought, oh, why are you selling it? This is a bit nasty. But then I thought to myself, how would if you had something that's amazing, how would you get that into a museum? If you give it to somebody, or I mean it's very hard to do that in this world we live in, but I don't think they'd respect it unless it sells for big money. They don't place any value on it. I mean, I think this is an amazing piece, and I would like to say to Lieutenant Colonel Finter, that George Finter, that hey man, we love your piece, we love your style. We hope you're looking down saying, yeah, that was my watch. I hope he's in a happy place. I hope he's in a retired battlefield up there looking down saying, hey, that's nice to know that they cherish my piece. I hope he can see the affection that, and I think that's something that should be conveyed, Tim.
Yes.
even though you are selling it, you do love this piece. You see yourself as a custodian. It's not just the money. The money,
Not at all.
Money can get very grubby. And I think this must be said here. You are a proud American.
Absolutely.
And I mean, the Vietnam War was very controversial, but this was a
He made the ultimate sacrifice.
Exactly.
And to your point, this watch could have been completely forgotten about if it was purely donated to a museum. It might have been stored away in some sort of file cabinet.
And probably pinched. That's what happens to a lot of museum stuff. You know, I'm really against donating anything to museums because they have such slippage. I've got to tell you, I think what you're doing is the best way to get this item.
It's recognition and remember this gentleman's legacy.
Exactly. And George, if you were looking at this YouTube clip, because I know they've got YouTube in heaven as well as cable TV. I just want to say, George, we love your effort. Tragedy that 39 you left this earth, but we love your watch. Great style. I mean, what you could just say to the man, George, you had good style, George, wouldn't you? I mean,
certainly did.
Lieutenant Colonel, cool watch. Don't you think that's what you'd say to him, isn't it? Lieutenant Colonel, cool choice, because everyone would have gone for the Speedmaster, wouldn't they? Because the moon landing and that there, what a cool choice. He went for the Seamaster. And I love the Seamaster 300s. They're I think they were better than a 5513 or a 60. I think they were cooler watches, better design. And so if George, if you are watching this YouTube clip, cool watch, George, cool watch. And if Tricky Dickie's watching here, you should have fucking got out earlier, you stupid shit. If Tricky Dickie is watching this clip, why the fuck didn't you get out? You said you were going to pull out. Anyhow, that's how it goes. So thank you very much. That concludes this interview. And
thank you, Paul.
Good luck. Just stay on the line. I'm just going to end it, and I'll come and chat to you. Ending it.
In the evening, they commute home to Quang Tri, but they do not get away from the war.
O God, our Heavenly Father.
Near where Charlie Horse parks its machines, there is a small, spare chapel. The men of the outfit who are killed are remembered with dignity and brevity.
And have it more abundant. Truth and Give our sound taps.
David SW. Who does Archie Luxury recommend is the greatest grey market dealer in America? There's only one choice, David SW. That's right, guys. I've got to tell you the honest truth. I have for a long time been looking for the perfect answer. Who do I recommend people go to see? Who do I recommend that people can go and buy watches? And I've got to be honest with you, the greatest pre-owned dealer for Rolex, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet is David SW. davidsw.com. That's right, guys. I have been looking for a contact who I can very nicely refer people to. I am not in the selling business. Customer service, I'm too old to sell watches. I'm too old. I like to recommend my viewers to a reliable source. In Australia, I've got some great sources. There's Sydney Watch Exchange with Cove, Ronnie at Vintage Watch Co, Shani at European Watch Gallery. And in America, who is the best source for pre-owned Rolex? For all the hot models? There's only one person I would recommend, David SW. David SW, David SW. That is the premier source for pre-owned Rolex. I gotta be completely frank and honest with you. Guys, if you are looking for a hot Rolex model, there is only one place you can go to. David SW. David SW, David SW. Let's be honest, guys. There's no point schmoozing the dealers, the ADs. They're just a waste of time. Unless you're going to buy 20 pieces, you are wasting your time. What you're better off to do is pay the market premium and go to a good pre-owned dealer. Who do I recommend? David SW. David SW, David SW. That's correct, guys. I want to tell you this now. I 100% stand behind David SW. David SW, the greatest pre-owned dealer in the entire United States of America. That's right, the greatest pre-owned dealer for Rolex, for Patek Philippe, for Audemars Piguet, David SW. He even does things like FP Jean. David SW, David SW, David SW. That's right. If you want to buy a pre-owned Rolex, a Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, there's only one good source I would recommend. David SW, David SW, David SW. I'm Paul Pluta, the method actor who plays Archibald Chesterfield III, and I'm proud to recommend David SW. See you later. Thank you for watching this channel.